I I was looking for the next best idea, and I came across it was around 2010, and there were a slew of origin stories hitting the cinemas, and that's interesting to actually take something that already exists and try to bring into today's audience with all its mythology and lore. And I said, if I could find my own character to do that with, that'd be great. So I made a list of possible historical figures or fictional characters, and it went like Joan of Arc and Napoleon and Dracula, whatever. And then I landed on Klaus, and I said, and I moved on because I thought it led to a very corny story at first, and I was like, I don't want to really do that. But then the more I looked into it, I did some research, and I found out about the many different traditions and explanations. You can go with the religious, historical, or many of the many different traditions, different countries. But there's not really one single accepted origin story for Santa, right? There's been a few attempts at it, but I thought there was room for one more. And then this idea of what if Santa is not the main character? What if instead of that he's a symbol for altruism? And then I create another character who needs to learn that lesson, and that's when Jesper the postman was born, and that's when the story started to gel, and I realized there was a good story there. So the premise is a young, somewhat spoiled, selfish character whose father has been trying to make something out of for a long time, is trying to flunk at the postal academy as much as he can, just to go back home to his life of leisure. And then Dad has had it, so he says, "Well, we're gonna send you up north, and we're gonna make a postman out of you." So he sends him to the most remote, inhospitable place possible, Smearsburg, and this place where pretty much everybody hates everybody. So there's no way anybody would ever write a letter here. And his task is to get 6,000 letters in 1 year, or else he's cut off from his fortune. So he has a pretty rough time at it at first, but eventually he realizes that he can actually use the fact that there's an old woodsman with a barn full of toys and the town's children in order to concoct this scam that if the children write letters, they'll get a toy. And that's how the legend kind of gets going without him really intending to. The driving force for me was like, what if everything that's good about Santa came about through the actions of the most morally reprobable character I can conceive, right? So that was more or less the idea. Well, the fact they're famous means we know about them. That's really, to me, the important thing is I know their work, and that's a plus for me. But we work with pretty amazing casting directors that help us along the way. And sometimes if I could get that guy, that'd be perfect, right? And sometimes you got to look for it. In the case of Klaus, we got a list of possible performers, and it was like 6 or 7 names. On the top of the list, it was J.K. Simmons, and I just said yes, please, and I didn't even look at the rest. Right? It was pretty clear that he would have been the perfect, and he said yes. So we already had a win with him. Then Rashida Jones came on board, and then I've known her work for a long time, and she was not only a great performer, but she's a writer, which helps me a lot. I mean, you got to keep in mind, I'm writing my first script in English, which is not my mother tongue, so there's definitely room for improvement, and she was a godsend when it comes to helping us, plus the material. And then Jason, the character Jesper, took longer to figure out, because you have a character who's filled with flaws, and it's very easy to fall into that place where people just don't like him, right? So you have to find an actor that can give that vibe, but also be likable at the same time. And it took us a few attempts with Jason, several sessions to try and figure this out. But man, he was the one that figured it out. He found it, and once he found it, not only he could perform it, but I could go back and write his version of it a lot better. Right? It changes because they are different, and J.K. would come in and he would take one, and that's the good one. And then you're like, well, we got you for another 2 hours, so I guess do it again, but just to justify the expense, because it's like first take, and he would surprise us with incredibly honest reads that we were not expecting. I mean, at one point he did a particularly heartfelt monologue that had everybody in the booth in tears, and so it was incredible. And with Rashida, like I said, there was a lot of back and forth. She would say, I think we can improve this, and I would say, go for it, right? Absolutely. And with Jason, it was more about here's the base material, but you run with it. And Jason can turn a line of 2 words into a 20-minute rant easy. So, and that's what we want. We want him to go with it. And it comes across a lot more sincere because you have an actor who's looking for the words, and that means the character is also thinking. So it comes across very honest. But sometimes I would say, I wouldn't even, I would throw like a concept at him. There was a moment where Jesper is about to be sent off to this place, and his go-to response is to appeal to his dad's heartstrings in the most humiliating way possible. He actually goes, "Remember when I was a kid and you used to, ask me to help you with letters and all that?" And I didn't act it out. I said, "What would be the lowest version of Jesper, the self-defacing version of it, where he could even do a kid's voice or something like that and like appeal to his dad?" But I didn't throw any lines on him. He just went with it, and then it was instantly funny. And then we put it in the movie, but it wasn't written that way. You try to make it work for the movie, but in this case, I actually had the immense help of an incredibly talented group of people, and my production designers were two Polish artists, Marcin Jakubowski and Simon Biernacki, who were fantastic, and they felt that the right influences they would bring their suggestions to me, and there were influences from early Disney. We had some illustrations by an incredible illustrator named Pascal Campion, who did some early work, and we said, let's bring some of that into it. And the idea was to, throw in elements from all these other sources, and in hopes that you end up with a new thing, right? We're hoping to look back at the past, but also renew it and find a way to make it look fresh. And part of that was this new lighting technique that we came up with, to try and give hand-drawn animation volumetric lighting, which is something that hadn't been done before. There were more than one, actually, but any scene with Jesper and Margot, the little Sami girl, it was a surprise, because she used to speak English, right? This character used to be speaking English, and then there was one time where I said, would it be stronger if they have a relationship in spite of the fact they don't understand each other, right? And can we find a little Sami girl that can act somewhere? So the whole process of going and finding Neda, who is this little girl all the way up in Norway, that we had to go and record her for it, and she holds her own with some of these great actors as well too, and going back and see how that came together and how much more honest it became because of that, it was a treat.